What is up, everyone? I am TST's the Mudman, and this is usually where I say it's time to figure out what we're going to play this weekend, but this meta is super solved and is staler than a month-old baguette. Everyone knows what it is. It's light is the best god. Control deception can beat it. Everything else is bad. But let's start things off the way we always do. We are at Mythic rank for the past 7 days, looking at god popularity. You can see that Light is the most popular god, making up a little over a third of all games played. Next one being Nature at a little under, or 19%, a little under 20%. Then we got War, Deception, Magic, and Death pulling up the rear. You are going to see. Well, actually, let's dive deeper into the popularity before we talk about any archetypes. We did this last week as well, because Light is the best god, and also its deck is like super attainable because it's so OP because of all these new core cards, which you can get for free or for fairly cheap on the secondary market. The balance team has said that they are essentially not going to do a balance patch until the next set comes out, so if you're thinking about buying those OP light cards for like $5, you can buy them and you know they're not going to get nerfed anytime soon. So more people have been doing that, making light more prevalent, blah blah blah. Let's cut it down to the 3-day Mythic meta. So as you can see, Light has gotten slightly more popular, and now we can see Deception is the next most popular god, which makes sense. It's the only other god that can win right now. But then it gets interesting again when we hit the 1-day, and as you can see, Light is 47.4% of the meta, so almost half of the games will be Light. And it'll probably be even more than half like over the actual weekend, because although Deception can beat Light, the Deception deck that beats Light is Control Deception, which costs like 1.4 ETH, so it is much, much, much less attainable than that Light god. So let's talk about, the meta generally. If you happen to run into Nature, this isn't even showing War. If you look at the 1-day chart, War isn't even good enough to be here. Wow, that's never happened before. This is a first in ever. I thought this looked too small. War isn't even represented in the 1-day at Mythic rank. That's completely absurd. Okay, so when you run into Light, which will be like every single time, it's going to be Zoo Light. It might go to 7 mana, it might not. They have really big tempo plays the entire game. It's going to be hard to win. Deception, although the Deception deck that you should be playing is Controlled Deception, like I said, it's super expensive. So if you see Deception, it'll probably be aggro. Magic over the weekend will probably be some sort of combo Magic. It'll probably be like few and far between with the Magic decks. Like generally in the meta, I would say like Ramp Magic or Tempo Magic are like usually more prevalent, but seeing as that no one's going to play Magic except for like good archetypes, it's only going to be Portal Wrangler or some sort of Aether Snap deck, which is also just not as good as Deception or Light. Nature is the same nature it's been forever. It is mid-range aggressive nature. War could be mid-range control war, it could be Slayer war. It's not as good as Light or Deception, so it doesn't really matter. And then Death is zombie or board wipe death. Just like all the other gods, it is not anywhere near as good as Light or Deception. So, let's jump into the first deck list we're going to discuss. Alright, so we're going to start things off with Light, since it's the best god in the meta right now by a lot. But before we talk about anything specific, I just want to do a quick disclaimer. The only gods that we're going to discuss this video is going to be Light and Deception. I have a couple different decks for each god. But the point of these videos is to give everyone like the best strategy they can have going into the weekend. And right now, like, there is no Nature deck that you really want to play. There's no Magic deck. There's obviously no War deck. You can see War wasn't even represented in the 1-day Mythic meta. But like, it's obviously it's not against the rules to play Nature, but like you're just making it harder than it could be. It's Light or the deck that can beat Light, which is Control Deception. So this week it's only Light and Deception because really nothing else can hold a candle to Light right now. But let's jump into it. This list was made by Darkfall. This list went 25 out of 25 last week in a ranked event. It is a fairly standard, Zoo Light list. Has good 1-drops, Aging Veteran, Pacifist, Vexing Vicar. It can buff them a million times with Shield Bearers, and Fellow Janissaries, and Militant Theists, and it's got the Mace, which is absurd. It's got the Light's Levy, which is really strong. It's got Iron Tooth to destroy opposing maces. Let's see, then we got the buff cards, of course. We got the Prayer of the Desperate. We've got the Asterius. Canonize for some single target buff. Holy Enchanter buffs the whole board so you can buff it again with that Prayer of the Desperate. One thing that this deck doesn't have are any copies of Radiant Dawn, and you're probably going to want to run Radiant Dawn this weekend because, like we learned last weekend, that Control Deception can beat Light, and the best Control Deception decks run a lot of sleep stuff. So having anti-sleep will turn that from a negative win rate or a negative matchup into a positive matchup most likely. But essentially speaking, this is the same old, stat-based, aggressive tempo Zoo Light list that we have grown used to. It's just really, really strong right now. And the next light list I want to look at is this one right here, made by B737. The main reason I'm showing this deck off is because it's about half the price. Not that this aggro light list is particularly expensive. I think that's about $120 USD, which is quite cheap for your average Gods Unchained deck. And keeping in mind, a lot of these cards are core cards, so you can get them for free. But this deck here is about half the price. So if that's 120 bones, then this is probably like 60 bones, maybe 70. So, relatively cheap. And as you can see, this deck has an 82% win rate over 35 games, so that's pretty good. And, it's light. Light's broken. Any light deck you play will probably be pretty good. But that is about it for the best god. Let's hop into Deception. Alright, next up we've got Deception, the only other viable god in Gods Unchained currently. This list was made by Devoted. It also got a perfect score of 25 out of 25 last week. And his win rate in general is just like completely bonkers. 40 games played, 97.5% win rate. That means he's played 40 games and lost 1. So this deck is super strong, and it's the only control deck that can beat Light consistently. And it's really just the only deck that can beat Light consistently. And the main reason it can do that is it has some decent control tools in the early game. Stone Skin Poison's really effective for destroying stuff. Sleep Dart's decent. But you have things like Golden Curse, which is really good for dealing with Light's board. And Toasted Piece is also surprisingly good. Obviously Light likes to play lots of creatures, slowly buffing them and then buffing them all at one time. Toasted Piece makes it so their board goes back to square one. They have to rebuild it. And, this costs 5 mana, which is the perfect stall tool into getting into the Elixir of the Snakes and the Rapture Dances for the big AoE. This deck also has 2 copies of Elixir of the Panther, which fills a similar role. It just stalls you long enough to play your big AoE cards. There is Thalia, who has been a joke card for the longest time and is finally good. It is a 6 mana 2/2 with Roar, gain control of an enemy creature with Sleep, and you gain control of it forever. So you can activate that for free with your Thought Siphon if you want. You can activate it for 1 with this, for 1 with your Spellbound. Lots of ways to activate Thalia's effect, and stealing any creature you want forever is really, really strong. And then your main win condition, at least against those light decks, will be your Demo, and then Demo's best friend, Witherfingers, for just really big sleep and really big removal turns while creating big, large creatures to kill your opponent with. If you happen to play, or get into a mirror match, or into some sort of control versus control matchup, you have Jason to get some big, high-value creatures in the late game to overwhelm your opponent. This deck also has the new cool little dragon, which would be good against things like nature and war as well if they existed. But it's also very good against light, since it's just a big creature with frontline and war that they have to deal with. And unless they order it or something, getting rid of it will probably cost a good couple of creatures. So that is a cool addition. Let's see, we've also got this Control Deception deck made by TSTeam Mirage, and this is really, really similar. The only real differences are this has a copy of Fever Dreams, for a little bit of extra card draw. You don't necessarily need more card draw, considering both decks have 2 copies of Screams in the Night, which is 3 mana to usually draw 3 cards. The only other differences is, instead of having any Elixir of the Panthers, Mirage also has a copy of Cutthroat, which is really good in the mirror match. He has 2 copies of Elixir of the Snake, which Elixir of the Snake is really important in the meta. Not only is it just a good AoE removal in general, but it's one of the only ways to deal with the Zealous March, and Zealous March is a really strong, I would call it an alternate win condition for Light. If they haven't killed you normally, they can just survive to 7 mana, fill up their board with 2/2 with Protected, and just assume their board will be good enough to kill their opponent with. And this AoE can completely deal with the Zealous March, which is really good. Hence why Mirage has 2 copies in his deck. And then the only other big change is he does have a copy of Deterra, which is really fun with Screams in the Night as well as Toasted Piece to get a whole bunch of little Deterras. Both decks have a fairly high win rate. Devoted's deck has played way more games, and it's just proven to be good against light. That being said, the deck is fairly expensive. It's worth a pretty penny. So if you have the collection to make and control a Deception deck like this one, and also this is going to be a pretty big time investment too. The games are not going to be quick. But as far as this week is concerned, it's only Deception or Light. It's mostly Light. Those are your only options. But that is about it for Deception. Let's jump into the conclusion. Alright, so it is conclusion time. And conclusion's a strong word. Everybody knows what's up. The best deck is Light. You know, everybody knows it. The meta is extremely out of whack. You know, as you can see from this one-day tier list, it doesn't even have War. I'm sorry I didn't have deck lists for all the other gods. It's just, the meta is so bad right now that everything that's not light and that one Deception archetype just really can't hang. But, you know, whatever you played this weekend, try to have fun. Come to the TST Discord and complain about how many times you went second. And have a wonderful day. Hey, you! Did you know that subscribing to the TST YouTube channel will increase your win rate by 6.9%? So what are you waiting for? Subscribe to the channel and hit the bell for notifications. And while you're at it, equip Scythe of the Harvest and attack the like button directly in the face. Bye-bye!